be at this point, right? So 3 days after today, 3 days left. If you work in Clay County schools, you can't be happy today, you just can't be happy. Which is really that simple, right? And so let's start off in that way. We do have some recognitions. Perfect attendance is one of those recognitions. One person will not be able to attend, and I'm going to, right, perfect attendance. It's kind of irony, but we are going to celebrate it at the 30th meeting for that individual. You know, a call came in and they're very excited about it, but can't be there on that day. So the second thing is our drug-free schools calendar. We'll have that presentation also. We'll also have the West Whidden Scholarship recipients. That'll be exciting for sure. We'll also have our teachers, our social studies teachers of the year. All 5 of them will be there for recognition. We'll also recognize those individuals. We have 10 individuals who have achieved level 2 principal certification, which is almost it's a 16-month process of training to get to that point. So excited about our new leaders. We're going to recognize our Teacher of the Year finalists, Ms. Matz. That's exciting stuff right there. We're going to have a check from Chamors that will be presented to the foundation. And we're going to have our first Ed First Citizen Advisory Committee update. You know, each year we're required to bring that to the board. So we'll have a presentation on that, and we'll have the chair of the committee there to certify that. And so that's fantastic, fantastic news, fantastic job that they're doing. So the first item is our minutes from our student discipline hearings and the board workshop on the 26th. And our regular school board meeting. The second one is Synergy Analytics. This is a contract to include the dashboard that goes ahead and provides additional services to Synergy users. Next, we have the personnel consent agenda. There's job descriptions for all the business affairs, administrative positions that are being revamped. You know, as a goal. And I said I was going to achieve this goal in my time in HR of having every job description, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, up to date or fairly current. As part of that process, I'll also tell you that there'll be 2 additional job descriptions that will be added for a president of the Ed Foundation and a vice president of the Ed Foundation. This is job description only. I've been working with the foundation. The foundation is going to pay for those positions, so the positions that will eventually come to the board as an allocation on the next board meeting, we will not be paying any more than what we currently pay for the foundation. You know, we're moving towards the foundation paying for those positions. So I'm going to ask Ms. Buchanan to come to our next board workshop to explain the division of those positions and how they would work. But I will include the foundation's job descriptions on this board agenda coming up. I will also tell you quite honestly, if this is a week in which we are finishing this week and everyone's excited about this week, and I too am excited, but I'm also very focused on next school year. And so one of the things that happens the last week of school traditionally is you look at administrative teams throughout the district, and then you go ahead and make decisions relative to administrative positions for next school year. So that does get posted on the board agenda on Tuesday. I'm in the midst of doing that right now with several positions. Once they're all filled and all done, I'll call board members personally to kind of explain where we are with various positions across the district. My goal is to put out an email to the entire district with a bio of everything on Tuesday. You know, they should hear it from me before they see it on the board agenda. That's kind of my thought. And then the board votes on Thursday for administrative positions. Great care has gone into the thought process behind each and every one of them. And so I'll be glad to explain that to board members once I'm to that point for that. But that's a tradition, first week of June every year. This is nothing new, in other words. I made it sound more dramatic than it really is, but you guys know that. I know everybody gets curious about that, and so there you go. No need for curiosity, you're gonna know everything. So next we have our daily hours for teachers and students for next year. This is a routine item that we're required to put on there. Next is our academic services overnight student travel. Again, another monthly item. Next, we have our independent contractor service agreement between the school board and the Boys and Girls Club of Northeast Florida. So this is kind of exciting, a little different. I got to add a little correction, to this. Originally, when we wrote this particular item, Boys and Girls Club has applied for 21st Century grant money, the same way the district would. Apparently, 2 schools that are on the list now currently would not meet the requirements of 21st Century grants. So just to be clear, this is not the Boys and Girls Club decision, this is the 21st Century grant. And it would exclude Clay Hill and Keystone from this current agenda item. We found that out. We're looking for alternatives, relative to that, but they just simply don't qualify. Part of the criteria, the old criteria was that if you were Title I, you automatically qualified. Now there's additional criteria that have been added, have been changed, and now just being Title I is not just the criteria. And I believe the fact that Keystone Elementary, which is an excellent school, it's been an A for a number of years, has become a victim of their own success in that. So we're going to work on alternatives, but I want to be transparent since the agenda item says those 2 names on there.
Sorry.
We won't worry. We won't worry.
I find it ironic that that's your theme song.
It's my goal. It's my goal. Let me say,
I feel good. I feel better already. I might even dance. No.
Mr. Brodsky, what's the cost per school?
The cost per school, we're looking at about $300,000
Per school?
per school. It depends on, obviously depends on the number of students, involved. So we're looking for a way to supplement that as a 1-year gap.
And what alternatives are you looking at?
Well, we're looking for a way that we could potentially use ARP or ESSER funding in order to provide a 1-year gap because of the sudden nature of this. I'll keep you apprised as to our discussion. We just in essence found out yesterday, or had a meeting yesterday about it.
So it was Keystone, and what was the other one? Was it Clay Hill?
Clay Hill.
And see, again, my concern, of course, those are so outlying in both cases.
Yep.
2 of the farthest away that have the lack of services in that area.
Well, I would think, first of all, let's be clear, these would be the only schools that would have this. So if you're looking at it, it'd be 7 total schools out
Right.
of 26.
Right, but I mean,
Elementary schools. The challenge that I have related to this is that as far as schools that were so gung-ho about the 21st Century grant, Keystone Elementary was one of those schools.
and one of the did the best job. I mean, did a great job. I mean, not the best job, but did a great job there.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why we're looking for alternatives to fund it for a single year in order to have a stopgap because of the sudden nature of this.
Okay.
But we'll definitely have to plan for the future on it because they changed the qualifications for who's qualified to receive the funding. So that's what we're.
Mr. Brodsky, what's funded by that money specifically? Is it positions? Is it curriculum? Is it?
It's all of
it.
that, total inclusive. So it'd be free to parents, which of course is the advantage.
Right.
People have the option of the Y.
And it's an after-school program?
After-school program. And one of the things that we are proud of that's kind of different is there's also secondary schools, because you kind of think of it as being how to care for children after school at the elementary level. You probably wouldn't think that it's also good to have high school students involved in having something productive to do after school. So if you look at the schools that are listed there, you have Keystone High High School, you have Clay High School, Orange Park High, and Orange Park Junior High, and Wilkinson Junior High. So all of those qualified, for the grant. So that's kind of where we're at. I know that part's disappointing, and we're working on attempting to remedy that. We just found out yesterday. So the item will be changed. Those 2 names will be excluded because they can't be on there. And then we'll move forward from there.
Is that something that possibly the Education Foundation could help us with?
The funding for it?
It's an awful lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot.
$300.
Look at their budget.
I know it's a lot of money, but I know that, I guess maybe not funding it, but their connections with a lot of the STEM
Yeah, we can
partners
certainly look
also.
for resources from them to help out with that. In
Which
fact,
I'm not sure that they would have in their budget, but they might have sponsors who would be interested in
Right.
helping.
Right.
with
Something that could be
already
matched
some
grants.
grants.
Yeah.
We can
I
do
doubt
something
it.
with
It's probably,
that.
like you said, the Easter dollars or something.
Okay, any questions about that one? So it's kind of good news and a little curveball at the end on that one, because that would be a brand new program for us, and we provide free services to parents. That's a win. Just a little curveball at the end is that the qualifications changed.
And is there a limit to how many schools per district can have this
So
program?
it's how many that the Boys and Girls Club can realistically service.
I'm just wondering, like, Bennett and Tynes, they seem like they would be schools that would benefit from this too. They all would, but
We can
they're not on it.
certainly look at expanding the program in future years. They seem like they're a really great partner, and
Right.
Ms. Pickett has spearheaded conversations with them. They're very interested in being a part of our school community. Okay, so that brings us next to the modifications to the student progression plan. You can see that one of the things I like about this item is that there's a cheat sheet of
I like the
of
summary.
all of these summary changes that were there within our progression plan. And of course, the need to review this every year based on legislation, et cetera, exists. And so here it is. It's approval to advertise at this meeting. And then it'll be, final approval will be at the August 4th meeting. Next is another big item, an approval to advertise our student and family code of conduct. This is a routine item every year, and of course there is a summary page for our code of student conduct. Looking at the same format, we're looking to advertise on this meeting, and then final approval will be on the August 4th regular school board meeting. It just works out that there's not enough time for the 30th meeting because our July meeting is in June.
Right. Not very many changes to that either.
No, really not. I mean, I think that there's, plenty of infractions and plenty of consequences that go with it. It's really about the implementation of that really is the key.
And I know Mr. Bickner's probably looked at this, the part about under the back, and I brought this up last year about the vacancies. We're seeing more and more of that in our
Right.
discipline hearings, that I just want us to make sure we are as strong a stance as we can be on that part of it, because that's kind of really taking the place of tobacco, to be honest with you, in restrooms and
So when it comes to like student discipline, it's really the implementation of that and the expectation. So there's going to be a renewed focus, this summer with leaders among the expectation for student behavior that's out there. We certainly have gone through a lot in the last 2 years, and many societal changes and many societal views about the role of education have occurred among families, and I think good old-fashioned telling people what we expect from students and then implementing that will go a long way with issues such as vaping in schools.
Do you think we need to strengthen that section though? I mean, if you read that section, I read it yesterday, it's identical to last year. When we talked about it last year, we were told that language is verbatim for statute. So the actual vaping part, I mean, I do hear from teachers, and I'm sure you do, that there's so much more vaping going on in schools.
So the challenge is the actual, it's not the policy or having a rule for it or a consequence for it. It's how to implement it. So everything from, students that will vape by putting vape inside of their sleeve and then doing this,
And then
or
their
attempting to put their hood up and do that. So it's really not about the rule that's there or the consequence that's there. It's the actual implementation of it on a day-to-day level. Back in our day, I can say that for everybody here, back in our day, you know, you would see smoke and it would be visible, right? It's easy to detect.
Yeah.
And now you have this, the hidden version of vaping that makes it more difficult to detect. I will say this, you know, there's a conscientious effort to do it, and we'll readdress with admin this summer
Good.
on that issue. But it's just, quite frankly, it's just more difficult to find. So it's not really a policy deficiency.
More strategies of how to deal with it.
Strategies for implementation, yeah, for sure.
I mean, as a teacher,
And,
I want the bathroom.
And I think education too is another piece of that, because, you know, the health effects of vaping are just as extreme as smoking, but somehow people are naively believing that it's not. Right, so part of it's education also.
You know, in that same vein, as far as things that are harmful to children when they're abused, I would really love to have another conversation about cell phone use.
Thank you.
I mean, I feel like, and I know that enforcement of a policy that's restricted is difficult for administrators, but we see so much as a board of the harm that's done by technology in the hands of children who are not responsible enough to handle it.
All right.
And I feel like we have a responsibility to protect kids from each other, from themselves, from the things that are out there that are harmful to them. You know, if they're not connected to our Wi-Fi and they don't have the guards on their personal devices, they can be accessing all kinds of things in our classrooms, in our cafeterias, in our libraries. You know, there are parents who, and I'm one of them, my kids don't have cell phones. So if they're in a classroom with children who do, and they have data usage, who knows what they could be exposed to? Who knows what, I mean, we've seen instances of children being recorded by other children against their permission. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're just, to me, those are abuses. And I feel like we have a duty as a board, like what you were saying, in the last 2 years, education has changed so much, and I get that we are very reliant on technology, but when you are implementing a tool that can be dangerous, you know, I think about it as something as simple as in a science lab. You don't just let kids run loose with Bunsen burners, right? We have a lot of rules, we go over safety, there's expectations that are clearly laid out for how this will be used and what the consequences will be if it's misused. And I really feel like our cell phone policy is weak. And I think that the expectations need to be raised and the enforcement needs to be severe.
I can only speak from an elementary perspective, but in the elementary classroom, our rule was always cell phones have to be
Correct.
off, excuse me. And in the situation where a cell phone was accidentally left on and you hear a text ding or you hear a phone actually ring, you know, it was one of those, okay, take it out of your backpack. I thought it was off, I thought it was off. You know the rules, it has to be off. I send it down to the front office. The payback from some of the parents was not always very positive.
Well, I don't think you have to
Because
confiscate it.
it's one of those things where we do have a policy, and we do follow through on that policy, and we inform the parents, we are going to follow through on this policy. Generally, the first time, here's your cell phone back, don't let it happen again. But when it occurred 2 and 3 times, that cell phone was held back. And that's when the parents got upset with us with, this is my way of seeing that my child is home. This is my way. Well, then we need to truly engage the parents on this as well. And that's where my concern lies.
Sure.
Because once we engage the parents and we say, okay, we're going to toughen up on our cell phone policy, then we're going to run into I mean, there will be some walls. There will be some walls.
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying we don't need to do anything to this code of conduct. That's not what I'm saying. But I think the conversation, we've had the conversation once, I think it warrants revisiting it.
So, and just to kind of reassure you, Ms. Gilhouse, we are talking about cell phones, you know, with our training this summer with them and the implementation of them and strategies. I think Ms. Bola brings up a good point. There are some parents that are so insistent on having access to their child, which I understand that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, the teacher is the one that controls the environment
Right.
in the classroom. So having more consistency for that
Right.
is really the strategy that I would implement to address it. So,
I'm not saying we should confiscate cell phones. My point was that we should make the expectation clear what we expect from teachers in the classroom, what's an appropriate use of cell phones in a classroom if there is any. And then, for me, it would be like anything else. If a child's playing with their bracelet at their desk in the classroom, I'm gonna tell them to put it away the first time. The second time, I'm gonna say, okay, take it from your desk and go put it in your backpack.
Right.
The third time, it's gonna sit on my desk until school's over, and then you can take it home at the end of the day. And I better not see it back. If I see it back, then we talk to mom. Like, there are escalating consequences and ways to handle it without taking away the child's cell phone in a way that they cannot access it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It can
yes,
stay
yeah.
there in the classroom without it being at the child's desk.
Maybe it's something that needs to be covered in the beginning of the year in a little more detail than it is, or send something home to parents letting them know these will be the consequences, but parents want their children to have it from the after-school part of the day. I understand that too, but
And that's
I do
fine.
understand what Ms. Gilhouse is saying because of the things we've seen where, social media.
it shouldn't infringe on the instructional.
Exactly,
No,
Right.
exactly, and I believe that's in our
But please-
policy.
Yeah, but please know that while we'll work on the implementation of that policy, when you get to high school, they sneak into the restroom, there's all kinds of opportunities
Well,
to,
sure, but
to
there's
do that.
also all kinds of consequences.
Right.
Sure.
And it's the same as vaping. Like, we're not going to make vaping allowed at school just because it's hard to police, right? Because
Right.
ultimately, it's not good for kids.
Yeah,
And I
I
feel
just
the same
wanted
way
to
about
point
cell
out
phones.
that if the goal is to have 0 infractions, it's not gonna happen.
No.
No, of
No,
course
no.
not. Of
And
course
really,
not.
the problem we see is not really at the elementary level at all. I mean, teachers and principals they're handling their school and what's going on. What we're seeing is more at the junior high and high school level.
What we see
But
is
you're
more,
talking
what I
about
hear from
parental
parents
influence.
of elementary
Really?
students, oh, sure, oh, sure. Because there's, opportunities in the classroom, whether it's the kids breaking the rule, which that may be the case, or it may be that there's downtime during the day where the kids are allowed to take their phone out. Things like that. I think we just need to be very clear what the expectation is and what the consequences are if the expectations are not met. And I think that, as a board, that would warrant a workshop for us, and then we can go from there.
And I would just like to add, because I was about to say, I feel like the vaping is kind of a smoke screen, as if it's one of our biggest issues, but I think it truly is the cell phones. And to hear how the schools are handling it differently, even in elementary level. I know one of them, they turn them in, and with the Marjorie Stone and Douglas, there's issues of whether it's really a right or a privilege, but the second paragraph clearly says the board sets the policy. And if we want them to be turned in and not in their backpack during class time, that's our decision. They can still have access to it in an emergency, but it doesn't mean that it has to be right there on them. And I think we've got some schools where it's a real issue because it's right there on them. And I think we need to look at it. So hopefully we'll address it all. Anyway, that's enough.
All right, are we good on that one? All right, so on to the next one, 7 mindsets. This is a renewal of the contract to put us in compliance with SB 7030. 7 mindsets, which is, of course, life skills and character education. Next, we have proposed allocation changes for 21-22. There are none. We're almost at the end. For 22-23, you can see a slight change when it comes to mental health social workers for next school year. Next, we have our monthly financial reports, which is a routine item, followed by our budget amendment report, and our deletion of certain items. Those are 3 classics. Okay, and then our bid renewal for ABM, that's our lawn maintenance company.
I do have a question there, Ms. Royce, I guess it's probably to you. Just, I know there's been some concerns about the quality, and I haven't heard as much of that this year, so I don't know if that's an improvement or.
I think people have kind of come to the resolution as to what services they're receiving.
Okay.
As you can see, it's a $600,000 contract, and the next closest bidder was quite a bit higher.
Right, I know.
The challenge that we have is that with this particular situation, it would require 42 additional custodial allocations to actually do it ourselves. And so while at times people have not been satisfied with the services that you get in relation to the cost of those services is there, and therefore some schools, supplement that, in a variety of ways. I was always big that on curb appeal, any place where I was principal, when you pulled up, it had to look like, and of course you have so many people, you only have so many people and so much time, that if you probably went around the corner, you would see areas that I wasn't as proud of, but when you pulled up, you had to have pride.
2 feet high over on the
I'm
side.
not saying 2 feet high, it was just not as pristine as when you first pulled up to the school.
Grass was
So,
always collected.
so I feel like we're in a good spot with them, and we haven't really had any, I think the company has improved their service over time.
There's one person that, since I was elected, I knocked on his door, and he said, "Are you going to take care of the pond behind this school? Because it's in our neighborhood and it's behind my house." Dr. Kemp probably remembers me contacting him, because when we were doing it by hand, it is very difficult to get around this pond. And I always knew when we weren't doing a very good job, because I would get an email from him. I haven't gotten an email from him
that's
all
what I
year,
said,
but
I haven't
I
heard.
did, I want to say 2 years ago, and ABM has robot lawnmowers, and those lawnmowers go around the ponds. And this guy was so impressed after they came out, and that continues. And it was just.
I hope you got an email.
I contacted him afterwards, I said, "Is everything resolved?" And he said, "Absolutely, it looks great." I haven't heard from him since.
And that's what I was saying, I haven't
So-
really heard from anybody
Exactly.
for a while, so
Exactly.
that's a good thing.
We
I'm
did talk
assuming
about it
that's a good
last
thing. That's
year.
what I
There were
was
some
asking.
growing pains,
Yeah.
Oh,
in the
yeah.
beginning. but
Oh,
they-
and the rain.
they've
You
really-
read last year, the year
we had a
before,
bad
we had
year.
so much rain, and nobody could cut the grass
And too,
anywhere.
when a
Yeah.
company first gets a contract too, everybody suffers from a shortage of employees, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
they were trying to play catch up too.
That-
Dr. Kemp, you got something to add?
Yes, I just want, I know the board will remember this, but one of the issues we were facing at the time and still face today was the critical shortage of custodians.
Yes.
So when schools were not staffed fully with custodians, often the outside of the school became second, third priority, of course, over cleanliness on the inside. So, part of the effort was to help offset some of the issues we were having with staffing at the time and still continue to have with certain functions. But just wanted to remind you of that point. And also, there was an unrealistic expectation from some of our schools regarding the entirety of the services. When you see 600,000 and the next one's 1 point something million, it's all based on the services and the frequency of which they
do it.
visit. And it's just those things had to be worked through. Like Bryce said, there was some growing pains and some understanding of the expectations for the service.
So Bryce, last year when we talked about it, and Dr. Kemp, I don't think any of us are wanting to go back to how it was. I think we're all pleased with it. But you remember we did have a discussion about the weeds growing, and it had something to do with the frequency of, we were on an every 2-week schedule, I believe.
Yeah.
But you were going to adjust it so it was less in the winter and more at the summer. Were you able to make changes? I mean, I haven't gotten any phone calls, negative phone calls
It's just
either.
better communication with ABM and ABM with the schools as well.
Okay.
We meet with them, or I meet with them quarterly, maintenance speaks with them weekly, if not daily. And if ever I see something and I call maintenance, they call ABM, and the next day it's pretty much taken care of. So it was just growing pains, and communication has just gotten a lot better. And they were great this year with the testing schedule. I know there were complaints before with testing and the mowers, and that was all just communicated better.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have our casualty safety, sanitation, relocatable and fire safety inspection report.
Yeah.
Okay.
I read that. There's a lot of stuff you guys have on your list to repair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, every year we do those inspections and then those repairs are listed and addressed and taken care of. Next, we have our pre-qualification of contractors, which is a standard item. And then the final item on the consent agenda is the Keystone Heights Elementary School, new cafeteria, classroom project, and the guaranteed maximum price contract award.
The only thing I have on that is that, I met with the architect and, which was a really positive meeting, and talked about phase 1. And he also showed me plans for phase 2, which of course is not included at this point in time, but I would just like to put a plug that I feel like while we're there, and the cost of moving back and forth and to finish what we start, so to speak, he's assured me that if that phase 2 goes into place, that will be like a new school. And I think that is very critical in the space and as it continues to grow, because we're talking about making those 2 old wings 2 stories, which the land size there is so small, but that's definitely what's needed, I think. So I just want to put a plug in that I think we need to move forward with all that, because construction costs aren't going to get any less, for sure.
Do we have a time frame for phase 2?
Not for phase 2. I know that phase 1, they start here this summer, August.
They're going to start right away because they've got to get a couple things done before school starts back.
And one of the things that I've seen done better here than other projects that I've witnessed is the communication with all those folks. I happened to be out there on a regular inspection, and I walked into their meeting.
Yeah.
That they were all there, and everybody was there with the model of what it would look like.
Yeah.
And a lot of good communication. I feel like the faculty there and everyone that's involved, that's a stakeholder, has been communicated well with, and sometimes things happen in which communication doesn't happen as well. So I'm very, very pleased with that. Everybody seems excited about it. So, I know you've spoken passionately about Keystone, and you two are passionate about it, and I feel like this is a really good plan moving forward to address some of the concerns. All right, so that brings us to the discussion agenda. I know you were all looking forward to this one, to appoint 1 board member, 1 citizen member to the Value Adjustment Board. So right now it's Ms. Gilhousen, and Joe Wiggins is the citizen member. I'm sure it'll be a riveting discussion at the meeting related to this topic. Next,
Do you want me to reach out to Joe?
I was
and
just
see if
going
he
to
will
say,
stay?
if you don't, I can give him a call and see if he's
I'll reach
willing
out
to
to him.
continue being on it. And if each of you would please think about, doing your duty on being on Value Adjustment Board. Question for you, Ms. Gilhousen, how many meetings are there generally in a year?
I want to say there's 3, 2 or 3.
It's 2.
And-
One in the fall and one in the spring.
There's usually.
And then it depends on if you're going to have hearings. I
Correct.
think we had an extra meeting last time because there were several new members to the board, so we had like a briefing of here's what to expect, here's the purpose, and go over the rules, that sort of thing. But it's generally, they meet in the morning. It's usually not an evening thing.
That was going to be my next question. So it's a morning meeting.
Morning or afternoon, but usually during the workday.
It was afternoon when I was on. It was like 2 o'clock.
And this
And
includes
maybe it was
full 2
afternoon.
meetings.
I may not be there.
It's like maybe no more than an hour, 2.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
they're
it's
short
not.
meetings.
Right.
Yeah.
The
It was
only,
pretty
The
interesting.
magistrate pretty much has everything done, and they hear all the hearings, so, they just bring a few to
Right.
the board then.
Okay, thank you. And, go ahead.
next is you guys are going to decide who's on the Florida School Board Association's Advocacy Committee. Currently, it's Ms. Karakis, and the alternate is Ms. Bola.
We've been ping-ponging this back and forth for the last few years. This year, the meetings they're generally at like 9 o'clock on a Friday, are they? During the session, they're more frequent.
We've been having Zoom meetings,
Right,
yeah,
they're on
Fridays at
Zoom.
9. And then out at the conference, it's the day before, and usually they meet at like 1 o'clock. It's an afternoon meeting the day before conference, so.
Right.
So it'll be Wednesday of June 7th, I think. Yeah.
And this is all based, generally what is discussed is what's going on during the session. And different bills that are being brought up in
Right.
both the House and the Senate. And sometimes, depending on what your interest level is, there's a sort of a subgroup of school board members who are on call to come to Tallahassee in case anyone needs to speak to a particular committee or whatever, so. And updates are available to all of us. So if you
Right.
haven't been receiving updates we just got one. In fact, if you haven't received the update most recently, it was very thorough, and the dates were interesting.
And you can find all of that on the website too.
On
You
the
can go on and you
FSBA
can read all of the updates and even legislative updates from session.
Mhm.
They do a really good, it's Dr. Thomas does a really good job with it.
But they do this is something that FSBA asks of each of the counties, so if you are willing to do that, make yourself known at the meeting. And just a quick, go ahead, sorry.
No worries.
I had a question after that, but it's
So
related.
next is
Right.
Special Action A. That's followed by the actual public hearing for the drone policy. Remember, we had already advertised that policy.
I think that's so cool that we've got, they're learning
Yes.
how to operate these drones.
And the uses for those have become more practical, everyday uses for individuals. Last is the St. John's Classical application to replicate. Under Florida Statute 1002, it allows high-performing charter schools to submit an application to replicate. It's St. John's Classical's intent to replicate during the 2023 school year. They've submitted their application to the district. The district had a team of individuals from every department that looked at the application. They made recommendations to strengthen the application, and St. John's Classical's agreed to those changes on it. So
There were a couple recommendations that didn't have a response to them. Will they have a response
They
before we approve it
will,
next
and
week?
we'll have both the red line version of it, everything will be uploaded on there. I think we got a final copy yesterday afternoon,
Okay.
so we'll go ahead and we're on there.
And do we know the location? It's not in the application there.
It's not here. I believe the location, Lance, remind me, at the corner of Henley and
Yes, sir, 209.
209.
That's the end of Russell Road going.
All right.
I think they didn't put it in the application because until it has approval, they can't purchase land or make any moves. So they didn't want to, I don't think, put that application until everybody had signed on the lines and all that sort of thing.
Any questions on that one? Okay, that concludes the agenda, Ms. Bowen.
What I wanted to jump in on, we were talking about some of our committee assignments. And my intent today, and I totally messed up and didn't bring it. I have an Excel spreadsheet of all of our committee assignments, and I wanted to get an idea of how many times these committees meet, what your responsibilities are. We talked about this when we were looking at the
Chamber.
Chamber, thank you. I couldn't think of the word. And we really don't need an assignment of that nature. We don't necessarily need an assignment of the BCC because we have, I know, it's not, how many times have you met? Yeah. So I would like to just get an outline. This is what we do, this is why we do it, and this is when we do it, how often. And I'm looking, for instance, at the foundation. It started off, when we first met, it was like monthly, and it was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we've gone to quarterly, or every other month, and we've gone to quarterly, but then there are so many other things within the foundation now that everybody can be involved with. So it may not necessarily be we need one ex officio member to attend the board meetings. However, if people want to get involved with Teacher of the Year activities, if people want to get involved with the Tools for School activities, I mean, any of us can do that. I'm looking at stuff like that. There are other committees that, the engineering committee?
Yeah,
What
so
was-
I've sat on the architect and engineering committees, and I'm more than willing to try something new and let somebody else have that one. You guys know my schedule changed, and I know that they like to do their interviews, obviously, during the workday, so.
I'd be happy to sit on it for you if you
Okay.
need me to.
Well, I
I've
think,
always
do
seen
we
alternate.
have, I thought we had an alternate.
Yeah,
I
we
think
should have an alternate.
Tina.
Yeah, and that's, I mean,
should be my
and
alternate.
now as we're looking at what we're doing, this is something that we're looking at now. And I just thought if we want to make any changes downtime, it doesn't have to be an
I think that
entire
would be
year.
great if we could look at that over the summer when we
Yeah.
don't have as
Yeah,
much.
I'm
with
bringing that up and, yeah, I'm just saying, hey, if anybody wants to change, you're on the insurance committee. It's my understanding you're enjoying that.
Always.
And you meet. I think you
Now, we
met
know she's lying because
3
we've all been there
times.
before.
Yeah. I enjoyed the insurance committee. I like that. I mean, it was nice,
I think
fascinating to
Travis
see.
thought I was gonna beat on him weekly about
Mhm.
checking out.
Yeah. That's okay, Travis can handle it, not a problem. So what I will do is bring that to the meeting and hand it out, sort of, we can figure it out then and maybe make some rearrangements at the next meeting or at the first meeting in August, whichever. So thank you. That's what I wanted to jump on.
So that's all that I have. Just a reminder that we're having an executive session right after that. I think it'd be best if we just went into the conference room so the guys can clean up the computers and stuff.
Today, we're having an executive session. How did I not know that? Did I
It
miss
was-
that memo?
It was in Miss
I
O'Malley's
had it in an email.
Huh.
Did anyone notice it?
I
know
noticed
Gil
I had it.
Hall
Yeah.
responded, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
completely missed that, sorry.
So it'll be brief. It'll be
Mhm.
brief.
15 minutes? Isn't that what you said?
15 minutes max.
Yeah.
Mr. Bickner, any comments? School board remarks, Ms. Gilhausen.
Just like I said earlier, I'd like for us to look at a workshop maybe over the summer to talk about cell phone use policy as it relates to students, but I think also as it relates to what we talked about with the face of education changing a little bit through COVID. We had a lot of digital interface between teachers and students, and I think just setting some very clear, very concrete parameters of what is acceptable classroom use and what it's not, both for students and for teachers as well.
Ms. Clark?
I do enjoy being on the insurance committee. So-
Did you get that as
No,
a record?
I've been very impressed with the ladies working in the Bailey group, and obviously they know their stuff. I mean, I was in it back in the mid-'80s when it was brand new. So things have changed a lot, but they know their stuff, so that's impressionable. I'm also working on a project because obviously we have more than just Keystone as older schools. So I'm trying to do what we can to find out what we can is another source of funding, and not from the citizens, but the big thing to me is that with the state, you know, they have helped us with funding with PPE and other items, but they totally forgot about the cost of construction. And somehow we've got to find a way to address the number of older schools that we've got and the conditions that they're in, and see what can be done. So that's just a little thing. Hopefully, you know, anybody has any input, I'd love to hear it.
Would that be classified under our PICO funds moving forward? For,
Yeah.
yeah, which they took away, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We used to get PICO dollars.
We used to.
Then probably in the last, 8 years, they've diminished from a fraction to 0 in the last 5 years. But we also used to have the 2 mil, which is no longer.
Now
So
down to 1.5.
Funding has definitely reduced.
And truly, in talking with legislators in the past, we're always talking, new legislators come in, but in the past it was frequently inferred that, well, you can raise taxes. to
Right.
make those. And
That's
that's
generally the
one of
response.
those
Right.
frustrations where you're sitting back going,
That wasn't.
wait a minute,
that
we're
wasn't
paying
the-
taxes
yeah.
already to the state.
But that wasn't the response this time. So I
Good.
think we're gonna hopefully all work together to see
Awesome.
what can be done.
If
What
that's-
other counties are doing, I mean, we are in a different situation. We have far more older schools. We have a different income level. We have an opportunity that some counties don't.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Awesome. Thank you. Ms. Karakis,
Nothing.
Ms. Bullock?
Just, the graduations were so nice, and I just a shout out to Clay High for going the extra mile by having a second one for those young ladies who had to make that decision, and I think that was very commendable. I mean, to do that, and the community that turned out, it was, I think those young ladies, I said, it's not very often you get to get a do-over or a do again or anything, and so I do appreciate that, and also it was an honor to be able to present my granddaughter with her diploma. I tell you, it was very, like I say, it's memorable to me, maybe not to her until she's old and gray, but it was very nice. I appreciate it.
I think it'll happen before she's old. Most definitely.
Thank you.
It truly was a great ceremony, and another thanks to the good Lord for keeping us all safe in the lightning and the rain.
Absolutely.
And I don't know what it is about Clay County,
I know.
but every year,
Graduation
the
night,
same thing
yeah.
happens.
It goes
You see
away.
that storm come through, and you see the people out there frantically wiping down chairs.
But didn't it cool off nicely after that?
And it was
We were really blessed that it was cool, there was a breeze.
delightful. I mean, I was Oakley, it was a long, but it was wonderful. And on that note, not being any further discussion, our meeting is adjourned.